Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the new AmeriCorps Program Staff Orientation. My name is Barbara Reynolds, and I'm going to be kicking off our session today. Before we get into the content, I do want to do a quick technology check and just make sure that Skype is being our friend today. Hopefully you can hear us, you can hear the audio fine. I'll do a sound check in just a second. We are muting the microphones. Also, if you can double check yourself, make sure the icon that looks like a microphone on your screen is X'd over, is crossed out. That will help with our feedback or any noise that we have today. So we will be using something called the conversation box in Skype throughout our presentation today. If you haven't already, click on the little icon that looks like a thought bubble or a word bubble, and a conversation box will pop up on the left side of your screen. Oh, I see Joe has already shared that the audio sounds good. Thank you, Joe. If everyone else, if you don't mind, just for my peace of mind, to make sure that you are hearing us okay, if you could just type a quick greeting, a quick howdy, how's it going, anything like that into the conversation box, just to give me a visual cue. We are in the weird world of Skype that we can't see you guys or hear you guys. So great, thank you so much. I see a lot of hellos, a lot of greetings, AmeriFriends. Thank you for that. I do want to let you know we are recording today's session. As you know, you've seen this in earlier webinars as well. So if you have any problems being recorded, please disconnect now. We do have the recording going on, and then we'll take this presentation and post it on the National Service Knowledge Network. It usually takes us a week or so to get the conversion done, but I just wanted to let you know that this is where you'll be able, this website, nationalservice.gov/resources, is where you'll be able to find the slides from today as well as the audio. So great, thank you for the greetings, everyone, and for the quick technology check. Today's presentation is part of a four-part series that we're conducting over the summer. As you know, and as you can see, we're really focusing on new AmeriCorps program staff, so folks who are just launching AmeriCorps programs from scratch right now, or who may be new to existing AmeriCorps programs. I do know, just taking a quick glance at the participant list and from your greetings as well, that a number of you have been, you're not super new, you've been on your program staff for a while, and that's wonderful. We always love to have a nice combination in the webinar audiences of the newer folks as well as more experienced program staff. You will hear a lot of introductory language today, a lot of really expecting or starting from scratch in our presentation, and that's why. So we're just wanted to let you know that that's going on. As you can see on the slide, we have 4 different webinars over the course of the summer. The content really does build on each other, but I would say these also will stand alone. So if there's someone on your team or someone who's going to come on your staff or your team later this summer, please feel free to have them jump onto one of these future webinars. That is totally, I think that'd be totally appropriate and hopefully very useful for folks. So for our agenda today, we'll do quick introductions. We have some overview information for the corporation as well as AmeriCorps, and then we're going to jump into quite a bit of discussion and quite a lengthy discussion with our colleague Liz Jung on the National Service criminal history checks. And so that's really the big, I would say, heaviest content that we're looking at today. We'll wrap up with a look at some resources as well as hopefully some time for Q&A. We'll see how we do on time and also how the Skype audio is treating us. But at any point over the course of our presentation today, please feel free to use that conversation box to raise a question, to make a comment. We certainly, everyone will see what you type in, and so if there's a comment or question you have for your colleagues, for other folks in the webinar with you, that's wonderful. Please feel free to put that in the conversation box as well. We're going to monitor that throughout today's session and be able to respond to you or at least take note of the kinds of items you're putting in there. So that is our agenda for today. You guys heard my name is Barbara Reynolds. This is my sweaty summer face. And I've been on staff for about 4 years, since 2013. I have the great privilege of working with our AmeriCorps State National grantees here in our unit. And before coming to the corporation, I worked at a state commission and an AmeriCorps state program in the great state of Maryland. I think there are a couple of Maryland folks on the webinar today. Nice. Go Terrapins. And it is, as I said, my pleasure just to kick off a little bit of the content of what we're doing today. So now, aside from the quick hellos that you shared, if you could please share a little bit more information in the conversation box. So if you don't mind typing your name, first name, last name, or just first name, what's the name of your organization, your program, or your commission? Where are you physically right now? And what's your favorite strategy for surviving the heat? Quick example. Again, my name is Barbara. I'm at the corporation. I'm physically here in DC with my colleagues Tova and Liz, and I head north to survive the heat, or I just complain about it and stay in DC, whatever. It all works. So what about you guys? Take a minute and type in some of that information into the chat box. Riding bikes and swimming, nice. Lots of swimming. I see a lot of folks are surviving the heat in the water. That's great. Thank you. Lots of iced tea. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for, please keep typing in your interests. It's really helpful for us to see the organizations that you work with, as well as physically where you are. It's good to know and see all the different diversity in the group. Great. Thank you. I think someone typed a minute ago that they were having sound issues, and I just want to see how the sound is overall for everyone. We are physically, Liz, Tova, and I are in the same room together, and we're using our microphone and our computer. So I'm hoping it may not sound great because we don't have on hardwired headsets, but I'm hoping at least it'll be audible enough and you'll be getting enough information. So if anyone else is having feedback or sound issues, please type that into the conversation box as well, and we'll see if we can make any adjustments. But thank you for the intros. Thanks. Please keep those going. It's my pleasure to turn it over now to my colleague Tova Pertman. As you can see, this is Tova on your screen, and she has also been on staff a little bit. She's been on since 2012, and I get to work with Tova here in AmeriCorps State and National. And she is a proud returned Peace Corps volunteer. So, Tova, take it away.
Thank you, Barbara. And welcome everyone to today's session and to AmeriCorps World. So welcome everyone to AmeriCorps World. As part of the AmeriCorps World, you are joining a network.
You're joining a network of about 800 grantees across the country. And together, we're all going to recruit, train, deploy, celebrate, and graduate 70,000 AmeriCorps members over the next program year.
Where's Rose?
So over the course of the next few minutes, we are going to have a CNCS overview, an introduction to some AmeriLingo, aka acronyms that you may hear pretty regularly over the course of your program. We're going to talk about how did we all get here today? How are AmeriCorps program grants made? The cycle of AmeriCorps program development, an introduction to member recruitment and selection, as well as a very brief introduction to the My AmeriCorps portal.
Tova, I'm seeing a couple comments about lots of echo and feedback. Do you want to try the earbuds in the microphone and see if that helps? Yeah, you guys hang on one second. We're going to try to do something different with the audio and see if that improves it.
They have this. Did everyone just leave the call? No.
Okay, guys. So we've switched. Oh, they can't hear me. Tell them that we've switched over to headsets.
Okay, we've switched over to headsets, and hopefully that will resolve some of the audio issues.
Yeah, much better
So
now.
great. So we're going to move forward. CNCS. So the mission of CNCS is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. It's important to keep in mind that AmeriCorps is a program of the Corporation for National and Community Service, a federal agency founded in 1993. In addition to AmeriCorps, CNCS oversees Senior Corps, the Social Innovation Fund, and the Volunteer Generation Fund. You can see on the slide www.nationalservice.gov. If you haven't already, we encourage you to check out that website where you can learn a lot more about the various programs under the AmeriCorps umbrella. So all prime grantees have 3 key points of contact at CNCS. And so this is very important to introduce to everyone. Your 3 prime contacts at CNCS will be your program officer, or PO, your grants officer, or GO, and your National Service Trust officer.
Dialing wrong, I think. You're good.
So the program officer, the CNCS program officer, otherwise known as your PO, this will be a very important person and contact for you as you start your program and over the course of your program. Your CNCS program officer is your primary contact with CNCS. He or she will support you in the implementation of your program and insist in resolving issues that arise concerning your grant. CNCS program officers review progress reports and monitor programs for compliance with AmeriCorps requirements. You are probably already, I'm sure, in contact with your CNCS program officer. Never hesitate to contact him or her. We're here to support you. I'm a program officer myself. Help you start up your program. You're starting a new program. There's a lot to ingest, a lot to do, and a lot to understand, and we are here to support you. So the development of that relationship is very important. Second key contact is your CNCS grants officer, or GO. The grants officers may also be referred to as grants management specialists, work in the CNCS Office of Grants Management, and they're responsible for fiscal issues concerning your grant. So GOs will review your federal financial reports, or your FFRs, and monitor financial management systems for compliance with AmeriCorps requirements. The third primary contact will be your National Service Trust officer. The trust officers work in the National Service Trust, which is an entity that administers the Eli Siegel Education Awards that AmeriCorps members receive after successfully completing their service. Trust officers are the primary contacts for issues related to the education award specifically. So any education award related questions, such as with regards to forbearance or interest payments and things along that line, would go to your trust officer. If you're not sure who your National Service Trust officer is, contact your program officer and they will put you in contact. So the CNCS basic organizational chart. So you can see here a tree, very beautiful, and it's a basic organizational chart of the Corporation for National and Community Service. What it's doing is it's indicating the agency's major programs and staffing units, and you can see those red arrows are highlighting the 3 key points of contact for AmeriCorps state and national prime grantees, those 3 contacts that we just went over. The AmeriCorps State and National Program Officer, Office of Grants Management Grants Officer, and the National Service Trust Officer. So here's where some of the fun stuff starts. We have AmeriLingo. You may have already picked up on this, I know you've been working to start up your grant, that either in written documentation, in verbal speech and communications, there are all these acronyms that come up, and they're the same ones that come up, but you may or may not be sure what exactly they mean. And so we call this AmeriLingo, and you'll become very familiar with it. And throughout today's session, you're going to hear a number of terms and references that will recur throughout your relationship with AmeriCorps, such as grantee, NOFO, GARP, and CHC. And if you don't know what these acronyms mean now, you will in the next few minutes. So how did we get here? Today's session is targeted to AmeriCorps program staff. And before we go into some of the more technical aspects of program management, it's always helpful to review how we got to this point. The AmeriCorps program grant-making process starts with the release by CNCS of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, hence AmeriLingo. NOFO, you will be hearing that a lot, Notice of Funding Opportunity, and the grant application instructions. This step typically occurs in the fall each year. Grant applications are submitted to CNCS online via the eGrant system. So all of you took part in that first step, the NOFO and the application instructions. So next, after applications are submitted in eGrants from applicants from all over the country, CNCS embarks on a 4-month-long grant application review process, otherwise known as GARP, AmeriLingo. GARP. That is our grant application review process. This process does include multiple levels of review, both internal and external, and negotiations with applicants prior to final funding decisions that are typically made in late spring. Successful applicants then receive a Notice of Grant Award, otherwise known as the NOGA, which is another piece of AmeriLingo, the Notice of Grant Award. This Notice of Grant Award is found in eGrants. It is a report that you can pull from eGrants. This Notice of Grant Award is your actual official documentation of the awarding of your grant. It's very important. It's something that you want to keep. It's something you want to look at and make sure that you understand everything on this document. And this is something that if you haven't done already, it's something you recommend talk to your program officer about. Go through your Notice of Grant Award or NOGA in case there's anything that you may not recognize and may need some explanation. So once you're successful and you've been notified that you're receiving an award, you will receive, once awarded, the Notice of Grant Award. The exact timing of issuing of the notices can vary in each grant year, and it tends to occur in June. Exact dates will vary, but once the grants are awarded, that's when the fun starts, if it hasn't started already, as I'm sure it has. It's time to find your AmeriCorps members and launch your programs. Programs can launch as early as August or as late as October. It depends on your program design, and there is variability and flexibility around those dates. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Barbara.
Great. Thank you so much, Tova. Sorry, you guys. We're sharing one headset, so hopefully the audio is working now. If you don't mind giving me a quick sense in the conversation box, if you can hear me, how the sound is, that will be it's a good way to I'm making virtual eye contact with you. Okay, good. I'm seeing some sounds good and some good to go. Thank you very much. There was a question while Tova was speaking in the conversation box I saw about the program officer. I think actually it was referring to the three staff contacts that Tova was mentioning, the program officer, the grants officer, and the trust officer. And the question was whether or not that applies if you have a state commission. And I do want to say just generally the answer to that is no. The way that we showed the organizational chart and the staffing contacts are different if you're a state subgrantee. However, much like our prime grantees, your contact at the state level is going to be your commission program officer. And that person will be your portal, your kind of frontline support. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that was a question that came up in the conversation box. Again, thank you guys very much for the feedback on the sound. It's helpful to know that the audio is sounding better. I'm going to move in a little bit to talk about AmeriCorps program development. As Tova was saying, we think, of course, the fun really starts once programs launch. We also know some of the fun occurs when you're writing your grants and you're getting a lot going on. What I wanted to do, just to get a sense of where you guys are in your year, in your program year, if you don't mind, in the conversation box, if you could please type in your launch date, meaning on what day are your AmeriCorps members going to begin their service? And that could be, July 31st. You could be starting your members. It could be September 30th. Any dates at all, or any and all dates will probably start popping up in the conversation box now. Great, thank you. Yep, I see a number of folks, November, August, September, July. Yep, just looking at what you're contributing here. Very, very common in our Ameri world when we're talking about programs launching. Something that's also common and really kind of universally true, no matter what start date you have or what type of program you manage or type of organization. All AmeriCorps programs undergo a type of development or a cycle of AmeriCorps program development. And the graphic you have in front of you now is a super, super simple way of representing how we see and how we talk about developing AmeriCorps programs. And so just as Tova was starting at the highest level with our org chart and begin with our grant making cycle, I wanted to start and just acknowledge that, again, no matter what your AmeriCorps program start date is or what kind of program you run, we do anticipate and expect and really want to support you in the overall development of your program vision, the foundation for your program, the implementation, as well as your evaluation and revision. When we're working with you over the course of this coming year, we'll see you moving through each of these steps in the cycle, right? From your vision as you articulated in your grant application to the foundation building pieces of your program, like your AmeriCorps member position descriptions, your service agreements, your policies and procedures. We're going to talk in just a minute about recruitment, which falls heavily in, of course, the implementation phase of your program cycle. And then we'll, of course, be following you and supporting you and checking in with you as you evaluate the work that you do and really look to continuously improve it. So this is just, again, a framework, I would say, that we use and that appears frequently in our training content. And it really is something that informs a lot of the ways that we talk about training on program development and supporting AmeriCorps programs. So one thing that I like to do separate from all of the magic that is e-grants and the paperwork and the rules and the regulations and the lingo, as Tova was saying, and that is to think about how AmeriCorps is somewhat different than some types of programs, right? We did just look at the general AmeriCorps program development cycle, but something that's really special, I think, about AmeriCorps is that we're talking about human beings. When we're talking about building the foundation for the program, we're talking about building a foundation for AmeriCorps members. When we're implementing our programs, we're deploying humans, right? AmeriCorps members out into the field. And I think that has a great privilege, obviously, and it also has particular responsibilities. And so when we're looking at recruiting AmeriCorps members, I do think it's always helpful to keep in mind some of the special characteristics or some of the special needs that our AmeriCorps members might be having, folks that are applying as well as those who enroll in the program. So AmeriCorps equals people. Who are these people? Of course, as Tova mentioned, in the lingo world, the folks that we're recruiting and who enroll in our program are called members. And so you'll see that word all over the place. We really want you to use the term AmeriCorps member as opposed to a volunteer, which is good to know. And it is, again, it's a particular designation in the national service world for these AmeriCorps positions. And so we know, based on the start dates that you gave us, looking at September 1, August 1, all the different ones that you can see in the conversation box, that most of you guys are probably pretty heavily into recruitment at this point, or at least you're right on the cusp of starting it. So we wanted to just review a few of the steps, a few of the important steps and items related to, again, AmeriCorps member recruitment in its unique world. And then just offer some resources to help you, hopefully at this moment in time. Hopefully this information is going to be super timely and appropriate to where you are in your program year. So when we're looking at AmeriCorps member recruitment, obviously, you guys know the responsibility and the great fun, I think, of recruiting these amazing individuals and human beings to serve in our programs falls to you. It falls to the program level. There are resources, I think, that state commissions share. I think there are resources that certainly our organization shares with the field to promote AmeriCorps. But in terms of the hardcore getting the bodies in the door and the boots on the ground, that really falls to the programs. And to me, that was one of the most, it was part of the greatest fun I had when I was at my AmeriCorps program, was the ability to and the responsibility for recruiting and managing and selecting and managing AmeriCorps members. So as you can see in the conversation box and really across our portfolio, there are all kinds of different positions, right? Different AmeriCorps member positions around the country. You can see the different start dates. You also know potentially that there are different types of positions. So there are full-time positions, half-time positions, reduced half-time positions, minimum time. There's really a buffet, if you will, of service terms that are available for AmeriCorps member placements. Just as you did with your start dates, if you don't mind, in the conversation box, type in the type of service terms that your program uses. So if you have AmeriCorps members who are 100% full-time, if you could just type in full-time into the conversation box. If you have AmeriCorps members who are minimum time, type that into the conversation box as well. Yep, I see a few folks have full-time, different service terms. So recruitment occurs across the country at all the program levels for all of these different positions, for all these different start dates, different service terms. You know from your grant terms and conditions that there are minimum eligibility requirements to enroll in AmeriCorps. So no matter what program you are and when you're starting in time and what your members are doing, all AmeriCorps members have to pass or have certain characteristics in order to enroll. On top of those minimum requirements, programs can also add their own eligibility requirements, as you guys know. So you may have included in your member recruitment particular age requirements, educational requirements, skills, or other abilities requirements. That's something that we expect and I believe makes a lot of sense given the diversity of our portfolio around the country. And then with all of this in mind, I think some of the standard recruitment steps that are universally true, no matter who you are, is the first step obviously is defining the member position. And then from there, figuring out who are the potential targets or what are the potential sources for finding candidates to meet that position. Creating marketing materials, certainly virtual as well as paper or tangible marketing materials, training your staff and your partners to recruit the AmeriCorps members, promoting or marketing the available positions in all appropriate ways, and then conducting the screening steps. When I'm thinking about the program development cycle screening, the members is as much a part of recruitment as conducting an interview. So, as I said, I imagine all of you or most of you are pretty much into this cycle right now, into the recruitment cycle. So, if you don't mind, in the conversation box, just looking at the standard recruitment steps, where are you, or have you done all of these? Are you at a particular point in your recruitment? Have you completed your member position description, but you have not yet identified your potential sources for your members? So if you don't mind, just take a quick second and answer that question. Where are you in your recruitment process for your AmeriCorps members? And then we'll use that information as we move forward. Okay, in progress, yep. Yep, you can see folks typing in. Yep, I see a couple of folks on the line have planning grants, so you're doing, you may not have yet had the joy of embracing the AmeriCorps member recruitment, but you can certainly, that's first step of defining your member position, I think it makes a lot of sense for planning grantees. Great, thank you guys, thanks for typing in those answers. Again, it's helpful for us to see where you are and what it is that you're working on. So as I said, one of the big steps for recruitment is screening the AmeriCorps members. And you can see on the slide in front of you, of course, there are program-specific screening requirements, again, based on the eligibility requirements that you establish for your program. You may take steps that include things like interviews, online interviews, in-person interviews, reference checks obviously are pretty standard. You may also have skills tests if there are particular skills that your members need to have in order to enroll in your program. You may run them through simulations to assess their abilities. You may have medical checks that are appropriate, again, depending on your program design and your target population for your members. On the AmeriCorps side, of course, there are specific screening requirements as well. We're going to talk a lot about criminal history checks in a little bit. That, of course, is the big dog on the block. We also have the AmeriCorps member portal, which is both a tool as well as its own screening requirement. And so we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about the My AmeriCorps member portal, since it is at this moment in time in particular super applicable to you and can be a great resource to help you with your recruitment. So I'm going to turn the headset back over to Tova. Again, please let us know in the conversation box if we lose any of our audio quality as we're making this switch.
Thanks, Barbara. So the My AmeriCorps portal as Barbara mentioned, it's a very important tool for programs and individuals. Programs use the portal to recruit members. Individuals use the portal to search for service opportunities and to apply to serve in AmeriCorps. And programs and members use the portal to manage the service term. So when we talk about individuals, this could be any interested party. It could be a potential applicant to your program. It could be someone who just wants to schmy around. Individuals access the MyAmeriCorps from the MyAmeriCorps login screen. And you see the URL right there on the slide where you can access it as an individual. So on the screen, you can also see that individuals can search listings of available service opportunities each year. And they also have the opportunity, you can see a link to apply for a specific program if that member service listing catches their eye and it's something that is of interest to the applicant or individual. Now for programs, for you, you may be familiar with this already, you may not. This is the program access point. This is what it looks like in eGrants when you log into your eGrants account. Every AmeriCorps program grantee needs to have an eGrants account. Programs access MyAmeriCorps from this homepage, and you can see the red arrow points to something that says Portal Home. When programs click on the link Portal Home, that will give you access to the MyAmeriCorps portal. So let's talk a little bit about member assignment listings. Programs complete the member assignment listings in the portal. And these member assignment listings are important for your recruitment. They are usually not as completely substantive as your position descriptions, but there are certain requirements that fall under that you would need to abide by when putting together your member assignment listing. This is what a potential individual or applicant will see when they're browsing to look for service opportunities that may be of interest to them. So programs complete the member assignment listings in the portal, and the minimum requirements for posting an opportunity would be a 2-line summary of the available position. So you're going to want to include 1 or 2 lines that summarize your program's mission and vision, duties and responsibilities, or member duties and service description, AmeriCorps benefits and service schedule, AmeriCorps program start and end dates, and dates program is accepting applications, as well as age requirements for service in your program, if different than the AmeriCorps minimum age requirement. So you see this slide, resources for recruitment. What this is we have a really great, detailed, and informative e-course called Member Recruitment, which will encompass a lot of, build off of a lot of what Barbara talked about with regards to member recruitment. But we also want to draw your attention to it because it's found on our Knowledge Network. And there's specifically much more detail with regards to how you create and put together your member assignment listing or your service opportunity listing. So we strongly recommend that if you haven't done so already, that you do take a look at this e-course as it should be extremely informative and will go much more step by step into the process of creating your service opportunity as well as other aspects of member recruitment. So resources for posting member assignments or member listings. There are several resources posted on the Knowledge Network that will help you submit strong AmeriCorps member assignment listings. These include descriptions of the minimum requirements for member assignment listings, tips and common mistakes to avoid when posting listings, and a member assignment listing checklist, which I strongly recommend you take a look at as it's a great resource. So when you go on the Knowledge Network, you'll see that there are these 3 PDFs that go into much more detail. They're great resources with regards to what to do and what to try to avoid when submitting your member assignment listing. And once you do submit your member assignment listing, as some of you may have gone through this, others may not have yet, it comes to CNCS and we have staff that reviews the member assignment listings, makes sure that it has the minimum requirements, and if there's anything that is not clear, it will go back to you via your program officer for revision and resubmission. So they are reviewed before they are officially posted to the potential applicants, individuals. So in summary, over the last few minutes, we covered several topics. We looked at the overall organizational structure of CNCS. In addition to, of course, welcoming everyone to the Amero world, we identified 3 key contacts for program grantees, for prime program grantees. We went through a quick review of how grants are made, how AmeriCorps programs are built, and how AmeriCorps members are recruited. We talked about the cycle of AmeriCorps program development and briefly gave an introduction to the My AmeriCorps member portal. So now I'm pleased to let you know that we're going to turn our attention to a really critical, important aspect of your program startup and your AmeriCorps member recruitment and screening process, which is the National Service Criminal History Checks. You'll see NSCHC. That is another AmeriLingo item that you will want to take note of. Sometimes it may say NSCHC, sometimes CHC, referring to the National Service Criminal History Checks. And so to do this, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Jung, a financial and management analyst in CNCS's Office of the Chief Risk Officer.
Thanks, Tova. Hi, everyone. My name's Liz Jung. I've been with CNCS since about 2013. I used to be with AmeriCorps Vista as a recruitment specialist, and before that was a New Jersey State Office Program Officer. And I'm also alum. I served in Vista in Montana a couple years ago. So let's just get started. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about why we do these requirements, why they're important, what are they, and then next steps. There's a required e-course that every grantee is required to do annually. I actually usually do this session in an hour and a half. So we're going to cram this to just 20 minutes, so it's just going to be very high-level, broad overview of criminal history check requirements. I really suggest that you look at our Knowledge Network page after this to get a fuller understanding of what's going on, and then take that required e-course. So why do we have to do these criminal history checks? I'm going to dive into these a little bit more, but we've got 4 main reasons. Safety is the first and foremost the biggest reason why we do these criminal history checks. We want to be sure that we're protecting our communities, we're protecting our members, our staff, and our beneficiaries. Screening and doing criminal history checks is one way we can do that. CNCS is a federal agency. You guys are getting federal grants, so there are taxpayer dollars involved in these grants. We want to be sure that we're responsible stewards of these dollars, and part of that is going to be ensuring that our members are screened and our staff are screened. It's part of the law. There are very specific regulations and laws about what we have to do with criminal history checks. It gets very detailed. We'll go into that in another slide as well. And there are also actually consequences to non-compliance in regards to criminal history check. It's one of the few that will result into disallowance. So talking about protecting our communities, in a protection system, there are usually 6 components to such a system. CNCS only requires you to do the half of the first step, which is screening and selecting employees for volunteers. You should be considering, if you don't already have this in place, putting in those other steps into it. So you need to really be thinking about screening and selecting your employees and volunteers. You should have guidelines on interactions between individuals. You should have guidelines and policies about monitoring behavior. What kind of policies and procedures do you have for ensuring safe environments? And then, how do you respond to inappropriate behavior? How do you respond to breaches in policies and allegations of suspicions of child and elder abuse? And lastly, you want to make sure you have a training program in place in order to combat any type of child and elder abuse. And you just want to keep in mind that abuse is not just limited to physical or sexual. It's going to be psychological, financial, or material. It's by neglect or by discrimination. So we want to keep our people safe, and it's also part of the law. So our CHC requirements are pretty explicitly stated in the law. It's in the Serve America Act. You're going to see it in our regulations. It gets very specific. The types of checks you have to do, when you do the checks, how do you document it, that's all listed out in our requirements. So you may be thinking, these are crazy, and that's kind of right, but we have to do it. It's part of the law. It's also in your terms and conditions, so if you pull up your terms and conditions, there's going to be under E, that National Service Criminal History Check requirement. It also goes a little bit more into detail about what the requirements are. So I talked briefly about the screening that CNCS requires you to do, and our screening criteria is actually very basic and very bottom line. There's only basically 4 buckets of people who cannot serve on a CNCS grant, work or serve on a CNCS grant. That's anyone who is convicted of murder, anyone who is listed or required to be listed on a sex offender registry, anyone who refuses to undergo a check, and then this is an interesting one. It's anyone who makes a false statement in connection to a criminal history check. So that could be giving you a wrong name. It could be using someone else's fingerprints. It's any identifying information that will prohibit you from identifying that person's criminal history check. We have a very thorough 3 to 4 page memo written by our lawyers and legalese that goes into more detail about this definition of false statement. If you need more information about it, it's on the same page as our FAQs. So just be aware that false statement in terms of ineligibility has a very specific definition. So just to reiterate, people who are ineligible to serve or work on a CNCS grant are those who refuse to undergo a check, they make a false statement in connection with their criminal history check, they're convicted murderer, and they're registered or required to be registered on a sex offender list. So there may be other people who are convicted of crimes other than murder and sex offenses that require registration. They can still serve. You may see applications that have false statements that are not related to criminal history checks. They can also still serve. You as a program should have additional screening criteria in place, additional policies in place to address when you have false statements or if there are other crimes that you're considering to screen against. So again, CNCS has very basic statutory requirements in regards to screening. There are just those 4 buckets. It's basically people who commit murder or sex offenses requiring registration that cannot serve. There are a couple other examples here on the slide of other screening examples. We've got the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency and Prevention, and then NCMEC. NCMEC stands for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So here are just a couple other examples of how other programs screen, what their screening criteria is. Okay, now we've talked about why we do the checks, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what checks are required. There are 3 checks that you should be familiar with. First is your National Sex Offender Public website. We call that the NSOPW. Your state checks and your FBI checks. Who needs to get these checks? We say individuals in a covered position are required to get these checks. What is a covered position? Covered positions are basically positions that are either paid fully from federal share, fully from match, or a combination of both. And then as soon as you've identified who needs to get these checks because they're in a covered position, you have to determine what type of access they have. Because what type of access they have to vulnerable populations is going to determine the type of check that they need to get. So if there's no or episodic access to vulnerable populations, they're going to get one type of check. It's a 2-part check. If they have recurring access to a vulnerable population, they get a different type of check. It's a 3-part check. And I just want to reiterate that access to a vulnerable population is not just limited to physical, it includes electronic and telephonic. I've mentioned vulnerable populations a couple times. You guys may define it differently for your programs, but there's a very specific definition for criminal history checks. It's going to be individuals 60 and over, children 17 and under, and individuals with disabilities. So that's what we mean when I say vulnerable populations. So just quick overview. When you're considering who needs to get checked, who needs to undergo the National Service Criminal History Check, first question you're going to ask is this a covered position? Does this person receive CNCS grant funds, match funds, or a combination of the 2? No? Then no criminal history checks required. Yes? Then the second question you're going to have to ask yourself is, what's their access to vulnerable populations? If they do not have recurring access to vulnerable populations, they're going to get a 2-part check. If they do have access to vulnerable population, they're going to get a 3-part check. I have a little asterisk here. And basically, this flowchart applies to people who have started after April 2011. That's going to apply to most of you. The law's changed a couple times in the past, so it would have been different. But since you guys are all new grantees, it shouldn't really apply to you. But if you are interested, there is more information on the flowchart. I see a quick question right here. Can you mention that state commissions may have stricter guidelines? Yes, state commissions can have stricter guidelines, and that's totally appropriate. The only thing, it just cannot be less stringent than CNCS's. And then you, in your AmeriCorps program, you can have even more strict guidelines. It just cannot be less stringent than CNCS. So again, one quick review. So if your covered individual just has no or episodic access to vulnerable populations, it's required to get an NSOPW, and then they have an option of getting your state or FBI check. If they do have recurring access to vulnerable populations, they need to get all three. They need to get this NSOPW, state, and FBI. So how do we get these checks? So far we've talked about why, who, what checks they are. Now we're going to talk about how do you get these checks. NSOPW checks are free and easy. You go to nsopw.gov, nsopw.com. We'll redirect to it as well, but it's basically a database that's maintained by the Department of Justice. It's a name-based check of public information and includes all states, territories, and tribes. It's really easy, quick, simple check to do. You're going to come to the right side of the screen and you're going to enter the first and last name that's on a government ID. People are very well intentioned and they go to this search by location function because they think if they put in more information about this person, the database is going to narrow in onto that individual. That is not how this function works. This function will limit your search location. It may limit it to the state, to zip code, to city. You do not want that. We want this NSOPW check because it's nationwide. It hits all states, territories, and tribes. So if you ever find yourself completing more information other than just a first and last name, stop. Start over because you're doing it wrong. This is what an NSOPW check looks like. This is me. This is someone who has no records. And sometimes people throw this away because they're like, oh, there are 0 records. You have to keep this. This is proof that there are 0 records on that person. There are 3 things that you need to check. You need to make sure that all states, territories, and Indian country have been searched. You want to make sure the name is spelled right. I know that seems very simple, but that happens a lot in compliance monitoring visits where we see the name is done incorrectly, then the check is not compliant. You want to also make sure that there's a time and date stamp on there because timing is actually critical for these criminal history checks. This is what a NSOPW result page will look like when there are hits. There's going to be a lot of information about the individual. You see where the name is kind of in red. That's actually a hyperlink, so you can click that and get more information if needed. You have to adjudicate every single one of these checks. I've seen it done, like you can see on the screen. They've indicated the reason why this person is not your applicant. They've initialed, they've done the date. I've also seen it where people have a statement at the top or the last page of the results saying, for all these reasons, this person is not my applicant, name and date. So there's one issue with this NSOPW result. Let's say you get this, you've adjudicated your 578 records, but then you see that this check is non-compliant because you're missing California. There are 2 things you can do. You can wait and rerun the check again, or you can go directly to that state sex offense registry. You just need to make sure that it's being complete. This happens a lot. States take down their sex offense registries all the time to do upkeep or maintenance, and they'll put them back on at some point. Sometimes grantees are lulled into a sense of security because they think this is quick and easy. And it is quick and easy, but they think it works 100% of the time. And it's not, because sometimes states take down their registry, so grantees may wait like 10 minutes before their members come in to say, and then they call their program officer in a panic saying California's done. There's really nothing anyone can do for you at this point. The risk that we would actually probably recommend that you wait and you delay bringing on your member until you've gotten all the states in for your NSOPW. Let's go to your state checks here. All right. Oh, I've got a question here about California. Let's see here. So California is saying California volunteer is saying you need to print from the other state. That's true. If a state registry is down and you go to that state registry to get that single state search, you do have to print that. That has to be part of your records. They can look different, and they may not have the date stamp. So you need to indicate on there when was the date and time that you ran that search. Here's another question here. If California is offline when you run the check, and when you run the check the next time, Maryland is offline. If you keep both forms, is that acceptable? As between the two, it should have all states. Yes, that would be acceptable. Another question is, does it matter if the ID isn't currently up to date? I actually don't understand what that question is. So if you want to just clarify, we can come back to it. All right, let's talk about state checks. So state checks, up to 2 state checks may be required for your staff or your members. You have to do a state check of the state of service or the state of residence. So if you have a program in Colorado, you've got a member or a staff person coming in from Florida, you have to do state checks of where the state of service and state of residence at time of application. Otherwise, or if you have a member and a staff person who's going to be working in Colorado, you guys are located in Colorado, you only need to do 1 state of service check. There are only official CNCS designated sources that you can get your state checks from. There is usually 1 per state, and you have to go there to get your check. If you go to any other source to get your state checks, it is non-compliant. That link on the screen is the list of all designated sources. And then we also created this year a state-by-state guide, which kind of breaks down the whole state check process. Then you've got your FBI checks. 2 ways you can get your FBI check. 1, you can go to your state repository. Perfect world, the state repository will do your state checks and your FBI checks. Sometimes that doesn't happen, so you are able to go to FieldPrint. FieldPrint is an FBI channeler. Channeler is a word made up by the FBI that basically indicates that certain agencies have a channel into the FBI database. There are only about 16 or 18 in the country. FieldPrint is the only one approved by CNCS to do checks for you. FieldPrint checks are actually pretty convenient. The turnaround is about 48 hours, and they will adjudicate the checks for you. So you'll get like a sign that says cleared. I think it's like a little green dot, and then not cleared, which is a red dot. All right, so we've talked about why we get the checks, who needs to get the checks, what types of checks, how you get the checks. There are even laws and regulations about when you get the checks. Timing is critical, because let's say you do everything you're supposed to do, but if you do it 1 day late, you're now non-compliant. So for your NSOPW check, you must complete this before the start of service worker hours. So that's before this person comes on board. Your state and your FBI check must be initiated no later than the start of work service or hours. What does initiation mean? For CNCS, it's 1 documented step beyond permission, but you get to define that in your policies and procedures. So it might be the day that you make a fingerprint appointment. It might be the day you actually get your fingerprint appointment. You could create an initiation form and have people sign that. That's fine. Whatever it is, it's 1 step beyond permission, and it's documented. You define it, and you practice that. All right. So in a perfect world, too, you'd get your check results back instantaneously. That's not often the case. Sometimes it might take weeks to get your state check back, and you need to have your member or staff person start. And that's allowable. But what you have to do is you have to do something we call accompaniment. Accompaniment is not a fun process. It is a very big administrative burden. What is accompaniment? Accompaniment is when a person who's pending their check results is in the physical presence of another person who's already been cleared for access to a vulnerable population. And who is that person who's cleared for access to a vulnerable population? It's going to depend. If it's a covered position that's on a CNCS grant, that person's already cleared their National Service Criminal History checks for recurring access. So they've cleared that 3-part check. If they are a person not on a covered position on a CNCS grant, you have to look at the clearance access that's already established by that place. So for example, if you're a school, teachers, by the nature of the profession and because they're working at a school, have access to vulnerable population. They've been cleared for access, so they are someone who could perform accompaniment. Who is required to be accompaniment? Those people and covered individuals who have recurring access to vulnerable populations. When does it need to occur? It occurs the minute you have access to vulnerable population, and it stops when you have both state of service and residence, or your FBI are returned and cleared. How do you document it? Best practice is a timesheet. Accompaniment is a lot of work. So if you don't have to deal with accompaniment, I really suggest you don't do it. Just wait till you get your results back. Otherwise, you have to document so much. And as soon as you miss 1 day of documentation, you're now non-compliant. So we have now just talked about how you get these checks done, and that's actually not where compliance ends. You're not done there. You guys have federal grants now, so you know if it's not written down, it did not exist. So you have to document pretty much every step of that criminal history check process. You're going to document that you verified that person's identity. You've documented that you've gotten written authorization to initiate those checks. The individual understands selection is subject to the check results. Document accompaniment if you do that. You document that when you conducted those checks, when you considered those results, and then you're going to keep all of those checks. I know that's a lot of documentation, so we've come up with this documentation checklist that you can use to help manage that process. A lot of times people ask us, how should we organize this? You guys are welcome to organize it however you want. This is just a recommended file structure, but you need to have all this information in place. So you need to have the documentation, the start date, proof that you verified the identity, have the actual checks, all of that information. So just to wrap up real quick, these are the requirements in brief. So criminal history check applies to individuals receiving a salary, stipend, living allowance, or ed award from a CNCS-funded program. Remember, it's those covered positions. So if you're paid with CNCS dollars, match, or combination of those two, you have to get the checks done. People that have been convicted of murder are required to be on or are on a sex offender registry list. Those that refuse to do the checks and those that make that false statement in connection to the criminal history check cannot serve. They are ineligible. All the covered positions require a search of the National Sex Offenders public website, NSOPW, and either state or FBI. But those that have recurring access to vulnerable population have to get NSOPW, state, and FBI. And just remember, timing is critical. These checks have to be completed or initiated before the start of service of work. And then I've got in bright red there, it doesn't end there. Compliance ends when everything is documented. So what are the next steps for you guys to do? Definitely go to our Knowledge Service Network page. Everything, this similar presentation, the longer presentation is up on there. That's where you're going to find the link to the required e-course. I definitely suggest you go back home, do a check, and then talk to your program officers about any questions. And just, you want to remember, you want to stay on time every time, because criminal history checks, non-compliant criminal history checks will result into disallowance. Oh yeah, so one last point. I know I've just hit you guys with a ton of information, a ton of rules, a ton of compliance talk, but just remember, there's a reason why we're doing this. We're doing this to keep our people safe. So just keep that at the top of your mind. I know it will be a pain, but we're doing it to make sure that everyone is safe.
Great, thank you so much, Liz. We just did a quick headphone switch again. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So that was, as Liz said, that was a lot of information, kind of a lot of different pieces of the Amera world coming at you. It looks like there was a number of comments and questions in the conversation box as Liz was talking, as Tova was talking. So we are now going to take a minute and we're going to read these questions ourselves and respond to what you've written in the conversation box. Also, I would say if you want to give it a shot, if you want to unmute your microphone and try to ask us a question with your voice, I would say that's absolutely, we can try that. I don't know how friendly Skype is going to be. It may cause a reverberation or an echo, but I definitely want you to feel free to try to make that happen. And if you don't feel like doing that, or if we do get some weird sound, please type your questions into the chat box. Okay, so any takers on the unmuting of your phone? Anybody want to try that? Anyone on the phone? Hi, is anyone on the phone? Like we don't have any takers on the speaker. I do see some questions in the conversation box, and I think these are technical questions for Liz. We took the headphones off, and so we're now using our microphone on the computer again. Liz, if you want to, I think Patrick had a question. about beginning of service. Do you want to take on that one?
Sure, definitely. I'll just read this out loud for everyone too. If they begin their service but do not have interactions with the vulnerable population, how do you document that those hours did not need accompaniment? I think you just document that. Document that they don't have access to vulnerable population and no accompaniment is needed, but then you're going to need to have a very clear date when they do have access to vulnerable populations and when you get those FBI or state checks back.
Sounds like a memo to file.
You can do it on the memo to file, you can do it on the timesheet, it just needs to be very clear, because you got to be thinking, if your program officer is there on a monitoring visit, they're going to need to see very clearly that they did not have access to vulnerable populations. We've got another question from Roberto. If a current AmeriCorps member is re-enrolling for another grant year, do they need to redo the NSOPW state FBI checks? That's a great question. That's usually in my longer hour and a half one-on-one session that we do, but it's going to depend. So we call this a break in service. If there's a break in service for more than 120 days, they need to redo the checks. If there's not a break in service, or if there's a break in service that's less than 120 days, let's say it's 119 days, no checks are needed. But if it's over 120 days, you need to redo those checks.
And that's calendar days, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's see here. California volunteers. Careful to do site supervisors who are charging their time to do grants as match. Yes, exactly. So it's going to be, if you are paid with CNCS dollars or match funds or a combination, you are a covered individual. You have to get your checks done. A certificate, you do mention the certificate is required. Yes. So that's a great reminder. When you do the annual e-course, you're going to complete that, and a little certificate is going to be generated. Keep a file of that keep that on file so your program officer knows you're doing it annually.
This is Tova. I just wanted to add, because I see one of my Partnership Challenge grantees on. If you are under the Partnership Challenge grantee type, and you would know it if you are, the staff check requirement does not apply to you. I just wanted to clarify that, so folks who have that grant type don't get worried.
Yeah, if you're confused or you're wondering if your grant type requires these criminal history checks, there is a question under our FAQs. If you go to our Knowledge Search Network page, you're going to see these little honeycomb things. You're going to see this honeycomb that says like policies, like 3 words, policies on there. You're going to click that. That are in our FAQs. That's our FAQ page. There's a very clear FAQ about which grants are required to get criminal history checks done and which are not.
And which have requirements all of them have requirements for members, but
yes,
with regards to program staff, if there are certain grant types that don't require for program staff.
So should all member supervisors be background checked even if their effort is not counted as match? So we only have our requirements. If this person is paid for by CNCS, match, or combination, they have to get those checks done. I think it's a good practice to get other people checked, but that's going to be up to your program. And then we've got another question here from Sarah. The list say that state checks must be done directly with each state. If I heard this right, this means that we use a third-party vendor to complete out-of-state background checks. Results are not permissible. No. So you have to go to the right state source. There is pretty much only one. There are a couple alternates. There's one CNCS approved state repository that you have to get your checks done. Vendors are a tricky topic because vendors are a huge point of non-compliance. You can use a vendor, but it's still your responsibility to make sure that those checks are compliant. So if the vendor is going to the CNCS approved state repository and getting those checks for you, and they're not limited by time, they're not limited in any other way, it'd be basically an equivalent check if you went directly to the state repository. It is permissible, and that check is compliant. But I just want to, we talk about vendors in our longer presentation, and we'll probably talk about it in the next criminal history check session we do with you guys, but vendors are very much buyer beware. We had a situation where a grantee came to us very upset because on this vendor's website, it even said on the website that they checked the state repository. They get their checks back, they see that the state repository is not listed in the searches. At the end of the day, you are still responsible for compliance. So, yep, California Volunteers says this is a great vendor checklist on the Knowledge Network page. Check that out. You are still responsible for compliance whether you do it or a third party does it.
And there was a question earlier on this about what will it count if an ID is expired, and the person who asked the question said that, I believe, if I'm understanding it, is that the individual's identification is expired, like their license, I'm assuming. Is that okay? Is it okay to use an expired ID? I believe is the question. Just wanted to come back to that.
Thanks, Barbara. That's a good question, and I think you want to be thinking about why you're doing these checks. You're doing these checks to ensure safety for your beneficiaries and communities. You want to make sure that you're doing the check on the right person. So if you feel uncomfortable that this ID is not appropriate and may not give you the right information, get another ID. Get another government-issued photo ID. I would also check with your commission. Maybe your commission wants a one that is not expired if they have more stringent rules. I mean, I think just to be on the safest side and conduct your due diligence, like try to get another government ID, or maybe you get two forms of ID that prove that this person is truly this person.
Great, thank you so much. Great, it looks like we've gone through the existing questions on the conversation box. I do just want to see if there's anything else that folks want to pull out at this point, anything you want to talk about or ask about. We have certainly a couple more minutes. Anything else that you have questions about or that we can tell you about? I'll just pause for a second and see if you have anything to type into the conversation box.
So just want to reiterate again, for criminal history checks, this is Liz, we just did a very, very brief overview of criminal history checks. This can become a very nuanced and complicated topic, so I strongly, strongly recommend that you look at our Knowledge Network page, look at the FAQs, do that e-course, talk to your program officer. This is one of the things that you want to make sure you're getting right, so that there are no disturbances, and also so you're keeping your people safe.
Great, thank you so much. I just wanted to, this is Barbara again, I just wanted to point out a few more resources. We've mentioned the National Service Knowledge Network a bunch of times in all kinds of different ways. As Tova mentioned, there are tutorials on the Knowledge Network on the portal, on the AmeriCorps portal, including the course on member recruitment that Tova referenced. There are also things called program development outlines, which are just training tools for you, resources for you to use as you build your member position description, service agreements if you have them, your criminal history check policy. There are 5 documents that are required for new grantees to submit to their program officers, and the outlines for program development are meant to help you do that. So again, those are on the Knowledge Network for you. We also have our full year's training calendar there, so you can see, in addition to these webinars, what else we have coming down the pike in 2017. Today's session, as I said, the slides that you've seen and the audio will be posted on the National Service Knowledge Network. And then we do have additional online courses. There's a set of 10 very short e-courses. They're about 15 minutes each. And the 2 that I highly recommend, again, right now for new program staff at this moment in time, one is the overview of the CNCS partnership, which goes into more detail than we provided today on our staff roles, the responsibility and the role of the program officer, the grants officer, etc. And then managing the CNCS partnership, there's a lot of good information there, again, in a kind of a bite-sized morsel that I think is particularly useful for new staff at this moment in time. So just want to draw your attention to those resources as you are, getting into getting your AmeriCorps legs, your AmeriLegs. Again, in addition to the National Service Knowledge Network, the CNCS website that's indicated for you here, and our next program development webinar will be in 2 weeks on July 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I just wanted to remind you about that. Again, if you want to join us, that would be wonderful. If there are new members of your team or other coworkers, please feel free to share that date and time with them as well. So I'm going to wrap up this afternoon by thanking my coworkers, Liz and Tova, for their great information, great energy, great spirit today. Again, I know we shared a lot of different types of information with you, pointed out a bunch of different things online for you to look at. If you do have questions, or if you want to talk about any of this more, as we said, please reach out to your program officer, either your CNCS program officer here at the corporation or your state commission program officer, just to make sure, as we said, we want you to have a really strong developmental period this summer. We want you to really start your program in a very strong position. So please feel free to reach out to folks, and I just want to thank you again very much for your time. Have a great rest of your afternoon. And we'll leave the conversation box open a few minutes longer if there is anything that you want to comment on or ask about. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and hang up. Thank you guys very much.